A treacherous cave full of traps, guarded by a dragon. Fields of crystals on Ursa Minor Beta. An eBay auction from some guy in France for 2 games you've never heard of that are going to end up costing you a car payment. Seriously, what am I doing with my life? If we've established one thing in this series so far, it's that I am a sucker for a forgotten TI basic game from the dawn of time. If some enterprising SOB put their 11K of magic on a cassette tape and wrapped it up in a little sleeve to sell in the high street shops in England, I want it on my shelf and in my videos. Every now and then I get a surprise, like when I found these 2 beauties earlier this year during a random eBay check. Not only had I never heard of these games, but the program Factory Limited? That's a new one on me. They've got color covers, they're in little clamshell boxes like tiny VHS tapes, and they're in France. So after a minor bidding war, these gems were mine, and all I had to do was wait anxiously to see if I'd just dropped way too much money on tapes that didn't even work. It's been known to happen. Thankfully, they arrived safe and sound, and pretty fast, too, and I was soon listening to the sweet, sweet sounds of data loading from tape. Dragon Combat by Paul Akers is one of those basic programs we've discussed before that takes up so much memory, even setting aside a little bit for disk access cramps its style too much to load in. Even using the call files 1 command to free up some space normally reserved for file access won't do the trick. In fact, the only reason I can run it from disk in the Classic 99 emulator, as you're seeing here, is because of its ability to use call file 0 and clear a few more precious bytes, an option not possible on real hardware. So if you're not loading it on an emulator, you'd better be running it from cassette with everything else detached from your console. Now, there are other options, including using the enhanced RXB language or modifying the code so the game will run an extended BASIC and access the extra memory, but right now, let's focus on the big, forbidden, scary... dragon? Okay, look. So yes, the dragon looks more like a tiny, depressed giraffe, and you're not much more than a stick figure yourself, as long as we're putting all our cards on the table here. But Dragon Combat is trying to do something almost impossible in TI Basic. Provide arcade action in a platform game. That means minimal input, minimal animation, and in a really clever code processing time saver, movement on only one section of the playfield at a time. You're basically solving a series of mini-challenges on one screen to make your way to the top. Now, I figured out the rhythm of the first couple levels fairly quickly, making short work of the Tunnel of Hammers, the Monster Pit, and the Cave of Flying Fiends, or as the typo on the back of the box calls it, the Cave of Flying Friends. But the boulders, the damn boulders! At press time I have yet to conquer the boulders, so I can't even show you the falling meteors, much less an attempt to slay the dragon with my 1 cannonball and save my companions. Dragon Combat is part of a grand tradition of games like Aztec Challenge, Donkey Kong, and Smurf, where memorizing a pattern and getting in tune with the timing of obstacles is the key to getting past them. It has a surprising amount of staying power, and I'll be back to keep trying to pass those boulders, as frustrating as it is to keep winding up back at the bottom level. Crystal Sweep, credited to one S. Walker, takes us out of the Donkey Kong dungeon and off to the crystal fields of Ursa Minor Beta, where there's a bumper crop of, wait for it, crystals, ripe for the taking, for 2 to 5 players. Your job is to cross the field in one of 8 directions, picking up as many as you can, looking for the rare bonus crystals worth more points, and doing what you can to box out the other players before they can pick up more than you. It's got elements of the snake game, but it's not really that, and it's kinda in the same realm as Othello, but not exactly. Each round ends when one of the players can no longer collect crystals and is effectively cut off from the rest of the board, and that player loses all their points, or Altarian dollars, they collected during the round. You can play the game for a fixed number of rounds, or until someone reaches a specific score. Now, the big drawback to this game, right off the bat, is the lack of a one-player mode. A lot of games did this to us in the early days, all the way back to Combat on the Atari 2600. Sometimes it was for obvious reasons. There was just no way anyone was going to get an effective AI in that little bit of memory that didn't take 20 minutes to make a decision. And because it was the dawn of time, nobody really knew what the habits of video game players were, or in what settings these games would be played. You didn't have a one-player mode for most board games, and those sold just fine. But it still seems like a big ask, especially back then, to assume a user would have $600 to spend on hardware, a keen interest in microcomputers, and friends? I mean, come on. Now, I'm not convinced you couldn't have crammed some rudimentary computer player action into this code, especially if they'd cut out the lengthy instruction screens. But I can attest that Crystal Sweep is a fun game with a second player, and the strategic nature of gathering the most, while also causing the most chaos to your opponents, does give it a dose of competitive fun. Crystal Sweep is also just a good-looking game. You know I love a good interface, and this one is simple as can be. In the modern age, playing via emulator, there is a tendency for your hand to drift toward the numeric keypad and one of input directions that way, but stay in the moment, use your little guide in the lower right, and you are good to go. Now, the screen is laid out in an aesthetically pleasing way, the digital font for the score numbers is a really nice touch, and of course, the little robot collector guys are awesome. One thing that'll mess you up when you first start is your lack of control over your collector. You pick a direction and set them off in it, but you can't stop halfway across the field to position yourself for a good block or a 10-point crystal the next time around. It goes till it can't go, and figuring out how to make the best of things without that lack of precise control is all part of the strategy. Now, the more players are on the crystal field, the sooner the board winds up carved like a Christmas turkey, and then the game kind of devolves into cleanup mode as everyone collects what they can still reach, and the loser can see their inevitable end coming a mile away. Crystal Sweep is just a slick little game. I really like it. With a few tweaks, it could be a Hall of Famer. And if you do have 4 friends, or you really want to ruin Thanksgiving, this would be a great multiplayer game with a ton of possibilities for backstabbing and treachery. Just the thing for the holidays. I'm glad Crystal Sweep made its way across the Atlantic to our shores, and I'm glad that it now holds a place of honor on the shelves here in the War Room. We'll see you next week. Don't forget to subscribe.